Oh, hey, welcome to Bob Talk. I don't know what kind of wholesome living you've been doing to land on this particular corner of the internet. This is kind of like a TED Talk, only I haven't been invited to TED and my name's Bob, so you're stuck with a Bob Talk. For those of you that I haven't had the opportunity to meet, or those of you who don't know me well, I have been a professional firefighter for 16 years. I spent the first 8 years of my career on active duty in the United States Air Force. After boot camp in the Fire Academy, I spent the first 4 years at Tyndall Air Force Base near Panama City Beach, Florida. At some point during those first 4 years, I did a quick deployment to Balad Air Base, Iraq. Then, after 4 years in Florida, I was off to a 1 year short tour at Kunsan Air Base in South Korea. I finished up my last 3 years on active duty at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada. While on active duty, in a surprise move to some, I took full advantage of those military educational benefits, earning both a bachelor's and a master's degree in health science. After separating from active duty, I continued to work for the Department of Defense as a civilian firefighter, first at Creech Air Force Base, just north of Las Vegas, Nevada, and then later at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington. About 4 years ago, I was very humbled and honored to be hired by the Port of Seattle Fire Department, where I continue to work and hope to finish out a long career. I have had the pleasure of working in firehouses all over the world with hundreds of firefighters from different backgrounds, countries, and cultures who are all like brothers and sisters to me. Something that connects us all, or that we all have in common, are that the negative mental health effects of this job can catch up to us. I've seen far too many of my brothers and sisters suffer the negative consequences of not taking care of their mental health. And I am no different. Last year, I had what I call a mild PTSD flare up, but it actually prevented me from working for quite some time. So that's what this Bob Talk is all about, firefighter mental health. We'll talk about the mental health conditions that this profession is known to bless upon us, and what about this job and our lives make us more susceptible to mental health conditions. I will tell you a little bit about what happened to me when it was my turn to have a mental health breakdown, and then we'll talk about the different parts of the brain that are actually affected and this job can cause physical damage to. Most importantly, I'll spend some time showing you some ways to keep those areas of the brain healthy and functioning optimally. Everything I say today really applies to all types of first responders, cops, EMTs, dispatchers, military veterans. I'm going to speak most specifically to firefighters, but it really applies to everyone. This Bob Talk is for all responders, and maybe even our families and friends could benefit. The skills I'll teach you are helpful for everyone, not just first responders that are looking to keep their brain sharp. So let's go. See this shit? That's not good. 37% of first responders, of firefighters, will meet the clinical criteria for a mental health disorder at some point during their career. And almost half will just consider ending it all. So 1 in 3, acute stress disorder, PTSD, anxiety, depression, you or one of your best buddies is going to experience one of these things. I don't believe these numbers really paint the picture of the dire situation we're in. Because this only counts the people who are willing to admit that they're screwed up, or the people that are so screwed up that for some reason management has to get involved. Maybe they get a DUI, or it doesn't count the people who just bury it all the way. The people who go home and kick their dog, or have a glass of whiskey and wash it down with a 6 pack of Miller Lite for breakfast. The guys who just suffer in silence, and girls. Or people who just one day quit. They just leave the profession. They decide they can't take it anymore. If you've been a firefighter for longer than 15 minutes, I want you to think about all the behaviors, maybe some of the substance use you've witnessed in your time in the fire service among your peers, or maybe even just some of the stories you've heard. and then look me in the eyeball and tell me only 37% of us are screwed up. It's a big problem. So we've established that firefighters have a pretty good chance of rattling a screw loose at some point during their career in one way or another, whether it's PTSD, sleep disruption, substance abuse. There are a lot of ways we can get screwed up. But when you stop to think about it, all of those things are a pretty reasonable response given what we're exposed to. A few examples. First, we have traumatic calls or potentially traumatic events. These are the calls that are no fun and they're obvious, they're terrible. Dead or severely injured kids, mass casualties where you have a lot of serious injuries or death, severe trauma, mangled bodies, car crashes, jumpers, suicide, violent crimes, stabbings, shootings. There are just some traumatic calls that we all agree that could be a career killer. It doesn't necessarily have to be. Most of the time, it won't be. But we all agree there are some calls you're like, ooh, yeah, that was a bad one. Some traumatic calls are less obvious. You could have a mass casualty that only had minor injuries, but because it was a lot of patients and a chaotic event, maybe there was lots of scrutiny, either media or just the public watching, could bring up the stress level of that event. We all know that treating a very sick or hurt kid can be traumatic, but so can just having that same kid be in the room while you're treating a family member, especially a parent, especially if that family member or parent is very sick or dying. The reality is, there are some calls that we all agree are bad and that we need to watch out for. But any call, given the right variables, has the potential to be traumatic. Then we have just our routine calls. These are our smells and bells, trips and falls, BP checks, all of those easy calls. They still add up. Every time the tones goes off, your body goes into fight or flight mode. Your heart rate, your blood pressure, your respirations, they all increase. Various hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. Just because a call isn't traumatic doesn't mean it doesn't impact your health because your body's going through these real actions every time the tones go off. Then we have disrupted sleep. We know sleep is very important for both our physical and mental health. And the extent of what it does for us is just now really being begin to understood. We do know we go through different cycles of sleep each night, and the different cycles do different things, and each cycle is important for a different reason. Well, when a firefighter gets woken up in the middle of the night, these cycles get disrupted. You don't get in and out of the cycles you need to get in and out of. Sometimes you have to be asleep for an extended period of time to get into certain conditions. And that's kind of a double-edged sword because our sleep is getting disrupted because of our job, which causes stress. A lot of other things in our job cause stress. Stress makes it hard to sleep, so our sleep is being disrupted by both our job and the stress caused by our job. This is a reason that so many firemen and women report sleep issues, such as insomnia and sleep apnea. We're away from home for extended periods of time. And just being away from home for 24, 48, maybe for my overtime hogs, 72 hours, that alone can be stressful. Then you think about when we miss holidays, our kids' sporting events or other activities, family events, things we miss. Sure, our families understand. They know it's comes with the job, it's what we signed up for. But that doesn't make it suck any less for them or for us. We miss out on things. Anyone who does this job knows or should know that while you're on duty, you're in the zone. You're ready to respond and handle business. The second those tones drop, you're ready to perform. It's a different mindset. And it's a mindset that doesn't work so well at home. At 6 in the morning, you might be blasting Narcan up some homeless dude's nose. Or, you know what? Maybe it's not even that dramatic. It could be just taking Annie Ethel's blood pressure because she woke up and felt dizzy. Then, a couple hours later, 8 a.m., you're in the drop off line at elementary school kissing your third grader goodbye. That can't be the same person. When we're at work, we're in a different mindset. And making that transition from that mindset at work to the mindset we need to be in at home can be stressful. And if we don't make that transition before we get home, and sometimes it's really hard, sometimes it's impossible. But if you don't make that transition, you're going to cause disruption for yourself and everyone in their household because, frankly, we can be dicks. And finally, as firemen, women, first responders, we face a constant threat of severe injury or death. We really don't talk about it all that often, but safety is ingrained into our culture because of how dangerous this job is. Life safety is always our first consideration because we know any shift at any time, any one of us could be seriously injured or killed. The threat is real. This reality may not always be at the forefront of our mind. We may not always talk about it, but we know it. And that knowledge causes stress and has an impact on our overall mental health. So, as you can see, there are a lot of ways this job can affect our health. But what does this look like in real life? We talked about all these things that can affect our mental health, but what does it actually mean to have PTSD, have a nervous breakdown? I really can only speak from my own experience. At my worst in November of 2022, I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart would be racing, sometimes I'd be soaked in sweat. I don't remember having nightmares. I wasn't worried about anything. I'd just wake up and my heart would be racing, soaked in sweat. That's if I was able to sleep. Because many nights I just lay in bed, just unable to sleep, just tossing and turning. I didn't feel tired. Often in the mornings, I'd wake up nauseated. I'd like have morning sickness. It was like I'm pregnant. Sometimes I'd even throw up. Often things were moving in the other direction, but definitely had stomach and GI issues going on. That kind of resulted in some unintentional weight loss. I lost about 30 pounds. Definitely not a complaint. I was pumped, but I wasn't trying to lose weight. I was either just nauseous or didn't feel hungry. Nothing sounded good. All of this led to me just being irritated. Everything frustrated me. I didn't want to be around anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just didn't have the energy to put up with anyone's BS. It took a lot of strength for me just not to yell at people for little things. I couldn't focus on anything. If I tried to watch TV, I would get distracted and need to get up and walk around the house or pace. Same thing if I was trying to read, especially if I was work, I'd pace around the station, just do laps. I always had this kind of sense that I'd done something wrong. I was always just waiting for someone to yell at me or be mad at me. Like if my boss would page me to his office, I would be like, just know I was going to get yelled at for something. I was like, "Oh, shit, might as well turn in my badge, about to get fired." I was just getting offered overtime. Then, on my days off, if I heard a siren or saw a responding truck, my heart rate would increase, my hands would start to sweat, kind of get that adrenaline feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I'd start thinking about, oh, I wonder where they're going. What are they doing? Oh, that's a BLS rig. Oh, that's the medic unit. I wonder what's going on. I would just start thinking about these things while I was driving to the grocery store. Go down this thought spiral. Not necessarily upsetting thoughts, but not thoughts I should be having on my way to QFC to get groceries for the week. All of this wasn't what I expected when I'd previously learned about PTSD, stress, and anxiety. I guess I had this real stereotypical idea of what it was to experience these things, like it was just contemplating suicide or being curled up in the corner crying. But these things can mess you up in a lot of ways. Now that we understand how many of us rattle a screw loose doing this work, what specifically about the job screws us up, and how a real person, me, experienced a nervous breakdown, let's talk about that lump of gray matter behind our eyes that we call the brain and see how it functions and how it dysfunctions can cause mental health problems. As I talk about these areas of the brain, the amygdala, the anterior cingulate cortex, the insular cortex, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex, it's important to keep in mind that these areas are extremely complex and they do really complex processes. And I'm only going to be describing a small fraction of what these regions do. And it's, I promise, a criminal oversimplification. My intent is to give you kind of the 50,000-foot view of how these areas of the brains work together, just my firefighter understanding. If you want a much more precise and accurate explanation, please check out Dr. Andrew Huberman's podcast on it's the Huberman Lab podcast. I don't get paid for it, but I'll post a link anyway. So let's start with the amygdala. The amygdala are actually two almond-shaped regions deep inside the brain, either side of midline, just kind of forward of center. The amygdala are sometimes referred to as the smoke detectors of the brain because they seek out danger in the environment and help activate our fear response, or fight, flight, or freeze. Now, detecting and responding to danger is essential for survival. If you can't notice danger and react to it, you can't survive. So the amygdala were likely some of the first structure to evolve in the brain. And this is supported by their location deep inside the brain, which in evolution would have happened first. Because this area of the brain developed early in evolution, it's a relatively primitive region of the brain. That means it makes a lot of mistakes. And with its goal being survival, if it's going to make a lot of mistake, it's going to err on the side of caution. There's kind of a classic example of this. So imagine you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden you go to take a step and you jump back because there's a snake. Only it's not a snake. It's a stick. It looked like a snake because you weren't really paying attention. You were looking at this deer over here, the shadows, the sunlight coming through the trees. It was a stick. Your amygdala thought it was a snake and acted appropriately because if it was wrong and it was a snake and you thought it was a stick, that could be catastrophic. So your amygdala aids in survival, but it makes a lot of mistakes, but it's going to make mistakes that will try to keep you safe. It'll alert you to danger that may not be there. The anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, because it's easier to say, this structure of the brain reaches out to all these different sensors throughout the body, and they tell you about what's going on. They give you information about your heart rate, blood pressure, respirations, temperature, both internal and external, pain. They also help you know if you're hungry or if you need to take a crap or go take a leak because they let you know if your stomach, bladder, and bowels are full or empty. The anterior cingulate cortex is constantly checking in and collecting information about what's going on inside the body. The insular cortex is an area below the surface of the brain. This structure is also involved in receiving information from throughout the body. It helps the ACC collect information about what's happening inside the body, about body position. We know it as proprioception, where our limbs are, how we're moving through space. But it also, the insular cortex, gives you information about what's happening in the environment, sights, sounds, taste, smells, felt sensations. So the two long didn't read version of these two areas of the brain, the ancillary cortex and the ACC, they're both collecting data about what's going on inside our bodies and the physical environment around us. In addition to that, they're also gathering data and giving us information on emotions. Are you feeling happy, sad, fear, excitement, angry, irritated? Of course, I'm not talking about me. I'm a big tough fireman. I don't have emotions. Maybe you do. And if you do, your ancillary cortex and your ACC are what allow you to feel those things. The hippocampus is the memory center of the brain. It's responsible for coding memory. When you experience something, the hippocampus stores it as memory to be recalled later. Sometimes, especially during chaotic or traumatic events, there's too much going on to record it accurately. In this case, the hippocampus tries to make sense of what's going on and fills in the blank. It kind of reconciles the data. It also helps you distinguish between past and present events. Are you remembering falling down the stairs, or are you actually falling down the stairs right now? For you to respond appropriately, it's important that you can tell the difference. The prefrontal cortex is a very complex part of the brain, and it's the last area of the brain that I'm going to bore you with today. It has a lot to do with higher level function. That means problem solving, personality, our sense of self, and kind of in general, what makes humans human. Part of the prefrontal cortex receives and analyzes information that's collected by the ACC and the ancillary cortex. I've heard it described as a watchtower that kind of looks over all of this incoming data. And it even picks up memories from the hippocampus and kind of decides what to do with it. It's a clearinghouse for all of this incoming data. It helps decide if what's happening on the inside matches what's happening on the outside or the environment or the circumstances you find yourself in. Normally, if your heart was beating 150 beats per minute, that wouldn't be normal. But if you're getting signals from all of your body that indicate you are sprinting uphill, then it would make sense. The reaction matches the response. Now, if something doesn't match, the prefrontal cortex is going to start making changes in the body and sending signals out to change things in the body to try to bring your heart rate down if you're not running. So it's going to regulate the response. If the amygdala fires off and you think there's a snake and it turns out there's not a snake, your prefrontal cortex is going to help tampen that response down, slow it down. So let me kind of put this together in an example that I think even a fireman could understand. This is how my morning usually goes when I'm at the fire station and I'm getting off shift. And I'm sure many of you can relate. I wake up, go take a leak, grab a cup of coffee, and then I go in the TV room, watch the news, or sometimes I sit in the kitchen and read the paper and heckle people as they're coming on for their shift. Oh, yeah, of course, I go make sure my rig is clean, fueled, restocked, and ready to go for the oncoming crew. And I clean up my personal crap and put it away. At some point during this morning ritual, usually right around the time I pour my second cup of coffee, but it's always before I finish it, I get that feeling in my gut. The coffee has reached its destination, and I have a decision to make. Can I make it home to the comfort of my personal porcelain throne? Or do I quite literally need to handle that shit before I leave the station or risk an emergency in my underpants on the way home? I feel that rumbling in the pressure stomach because the ACC or the ancillary cortex are picking up these signals. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's picking up these signals and letting me know, hey, you got to go. Hell, at this point, the amygdala may be firing off with a smoke detector alarm for my underpants. I'm not a brain scientist. I don't really understand the nuances. What I do know is that the prefrontal cortex is going to reach out and look at all of these signals. And if it's fired up, running on all cylinders, it's going to help me make a good decision and let me know whether I got to handle it now or if I can get home. All poop jokes aside, we know from brain scans that when the prefrontal cortex is firing on all cylinders, you're in a really good place to trust your instincts and to act on all the information that you're receiving about your physical body and the environment. You're in a position to make good decisions. So the amygdala, the ACC, the inferior cortex, and the prefrontal cortex, along with the hippocampus, all kind of give us these abilities to collect, compare, judge, and act on information, not only about our internal bodies, but also the external environment and situations, and even our emotions. So let's do a quick exercise to kind of isolate and name those abilities to compact, to collect, compare, judge, and act on this information. So I just want you to sit back, relax, bear with me, trust me. Take a deep breath. And as you let it out, lean back and close your eyes and just kind of sink into your chair. And I want you to take a couple of deep breaths in and out. And as you're slowly exhaling, relax your shoulders. See if you can relax your face muscles. And then, just casually, see if you can feel your tongue. You don't need to move it. Just see if you can become aware of your tongue. Is it touching anything else in your mouth? Can you feel it taking up space? Can you feel the space around your tongue? Okay, take a couple of more deep breaths. You can open your eyes. Stop thinking about your tongue. Don't be weird. This is awareness and attention. You can do this because your ACC, your insular cortex, and your prefrontal cortex are all working together to give you executive functions. You can decide what inputs to focus on. Your tongue is always having these feelings, but you can choose to focus on it or not. You can choose to place your attention wherever you want to place it. You can choose to focus on signals coming from your tongue or from anywhere else. When you focus on it, this is concentration. And if we're maybe not talking about your tongue, maybe back to the example of the rumble in my guts. Maybe you compare that feeling to previous signals that you've had that rumbling in your guts before, and you remember the outcome of those events. You can make predictions about this time, what's going to happen. Maybe your hippocampus chimes in with a memory of that big old shift dinner you ate last night. Oh, yeah, with ice cream. Probably not making it home for this one. A lot of this is all happening subconsciously, but you're picking up on these different signals, and that's giving you clarity into the internal signals and how they relate to the circumstances and environment that we're in. These functions are all vital for self-control. That's the ability to monitor and regulate our mood and behavior. It also aids in planning and it improves mental flexibility. That's the ability to adapt to new or changing information. All of these skills are especially important during complex or goal directed tasks, like mitigating a life or death emergency, especially at 2 in the morning. So, what does all of this have to do with firefighter mental health and the areas of the brain that got weak because of our jobs? Well, it's not great news because the areas of our brain that are impacted by trauma are the same areas of the brain that control these executive functions, the same areas of the brain that help you monitor yourself and the environment. The amygdala increases in size, it becomes hyperreactive, causes uh, increased trauma response, negative mood, extreme startle response. So the thing that warns you of danger and has a tendency to be a little overreactive and incorrect becomes more overactive and often more incorrect more often. While that's happening, the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, along with the ACC, all lose volume and become less effective. So the things that are supposed to regulate the amygdala stop functioning as well. When we're talking about PTSD, stress, anxiety disorders, whatever you want to call it, the events we experience each shift can physically change the structures of our brains, resulting in mental health conditions. This is just sure shit the same way that carcinogens can physically grow cancer in our bodies. Are okay, great. What do we do about it? Well, just like we strengthen other muscles in our body, we can strengthen the physical areas of our brain that are responsible for these executive functions. The same areas of the brain that get out of whack in firefighters. In fact, we just got done practicing. It's that simple. We just practiced directing our attention to our tongues, being aware of our tongues. We directed our attention to something specific on purpose. This is called mindfulness, which is paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non judgmentally. Anyone who has served in the military in the last 20, 30 years, and probably a lot of firefighters, will tell you that at some point during their career, maybe once a year during their career, they've sat through many don't kill yourself classes. I mean, resiliency classes or mental health stand down days. You've been around, you've probably been a part of one of these things. During many of these that I went through, and even in my college level classes, mindfulness is something that was always strongly recommended as both a preventative measure and a tool to help you live with PTSD, anxiety, stress, or whatever we want to call it. And that's all well and good, but I've already told you more about mindfulness than anything I learned in all of those classes combined. And I haven't said shit yet. They told us to do it, but they didn't tell us what it was or how to do it. So, what does mindfulness mean? What is paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non judgmentally, even mean? Why should you do it? And how can you start? Let's start with a little history lesson. Mindfulness has been practiced in various ways since nearly the beginning of time, across all religions, cultures, peoples, everyone from like the Buddha to samurai warriors, Kobe Bryant, modern day Navy SEAL teams have practiced mindfulness in some way. Mindfulness can be practiced in almost unlimited number of ways, and different groups do it different ways. No one way is better than the other. No one way is more right than another. And most of the people who practice mindfulness agree with that. As long as you're focusing your attention on purpose, non judgmentally, you are practicing mindfulness. Everything else is a bonus. Okay, so why did all these people do it? What's in it for you? Why should you spend your time just practicing, focusing your attention on purpose in the present moment, whatever that means? I said we don't have a goal, but that doesn't mean there isn't benefit. There can be acute benefits, and that is helping you calm down in the moment or recenter, helping you focus. And that's great and shouldn't be discounted, but that's not really the point or why I think it's so important, especially for first responders to do. It's the long term benefits. What happens inside the brain, the changes to the structures inside the brain, that's what's really exciting because those structures are going to help improve executive function, improve self regulation, and improve emotional resilience. These benefits happen because mindfulness induces neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to reorganize itself, change, and grow. Over time, a regular mindfulness practice will reduce the size and activity of the amygdala, leading to decreased activation to stress and improved emotional regulation. At the same time, the thickness of the prefrontal cortex, and remember, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision making, self regulation, making input sense of all the inputs from the ACC, the insular cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus, which all of those, by the way, are also positively infected by mindfulness. So the amygdala is becoming less reactive, the prefrontal cortex is becoming more reactive and working better, and so is the ACC, the insular cortex, and the hippocampus. Okay, but what does that really mean in real life? Well, remember those areas of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the ACC, the insular cortex, all get screwed up with our job. This reverses that damage and can even strengthen those areas and make them more resilient. That means your body's just going to regulate itself better. Respirations, heart rate, digestion, everything's just going to work a little bit better. But that's not all. You're naturally going to make better decisions because you'll be able to process information more accurately, quicker. You'll be able to predict the outcomes of your actions and the actions of others quicker, more accurately. And I mentioned there are a lot of different traditions and ways to practice because people have been doing it different ways since the beginning of time. Sometimes, or maybe most of the times, these traditions or practices can highlight or explore one of these benefits and kind of an attempt to get the most out of it. You can kind of think about it the way you might focus physical exercise to produce a desired result. Maybe you're training for running or football or tennis, or you're training to add muscle mass or to lose weight. Whatever the case may be, there are a bunch of different ways to exercise to achieve different goals. Or you can do something super basic like going for a 30-minute walk every day and still achieve general health benefits. Mindfulness exercise work in a lot in the same way. You can kind of do something super specific, get into something you like, or you can just do basic mindfulness practices and reap the general benefits. This is a brain scan that shows the amygdala after an 8-week mindfulness based stress reduction class. This is a formal class that meets once a week for 2 hours each week and then has a weekend, 1 day long, full day session. So as you can see, it's before training where the amygdala is lit up, fired yellow. That's showing a lot of activation. And then after the 8 weeks of training, we see on the scan less activation, red. Red. So we can actually see these practices making changes in the brain from brain scans. Okay, right. But how do you do it? I mean, mindfulness is simple, but it's not always easy. But it is simple. So first, you focus your attention. And we just did that. We focused on our tongue. At some point, you're going to lose your focus or get distracted. And we'll talk a little bit more about things we can focus on or things that can distract us in a minute. But anyway, you get distracted. That's okay because on purpose, you can choose to go back to whatever you're focusing on. You do this, you do your best to do this non-judgmentally. No big deal, you got distracted. Nothing to be frustrated about because that just gave you an opportunity to go back to what you were focusing on. All the while, we're going to try to stay present in the present moment, the here and now. We're going to try to uh, bring our attention back to what we're focusing on and not think about the future or the past. Mindful is not goal oriented. It's not trying to clear your mind or an attempt to not think. Our goal isn't relaxation. Sure, you're likely to relax while you do it. It's a known side effect, but it's not really the goal or what we're striving for. We are only observing what is happening, nothing else. Mindfulness is not anything else other than observing what is happening in the present moment. And this is my favorite part because there's no pressure to do it right. Because anything that's happening is right. You're just observing it. But sometimes people get confused and they think there is a goal. Or they say, my mind races. Or I can't clear my mind. I think too much for mindfulness. No, no. We need those distractions. Because getting distracted from your object of attention is the point. In a lot of ways, mindfulness is like jacking iron for your brain. Think about how we strengthen any other muscle. Really, how do we do it? We work out, we exercise.
I lift things up and put them down. Excuse me? I lift things up and put them down.
That's right, we pick things up and we put them down over and over again. So, to strengthen our mental muscles, we use our ACC, the ancillary cortex, and the prefrontal cortex to focus our attention on an object of awareness. That's the pickup phase, the concentric phase of the exercise. We just practice that by feeling our tongues. But you can choose to focus your attention on almost anything. Some people choose to focus on their breath, maybe the feeling of air as they breathe in, cresting, going around the edge of their nose, or as it makes the turn to go down their throat. Some people like to feel their heartbeat. But it's also possible to go outside your body and bring your attention to something in the external environment, like a sight or a sound. You can choose to notice and focus on something either inside or outside your body. Then you focus on it and you see what happens. And whatever happens is perfectly fine. At some point, you will get distracted. You will start thinking. Maybe thinking, how did I get bamboozled into watching this Bob talk? Maybe you're thinking about what you want for dinner, or that stupid thing you said to your spouse or your significant other that pissed them off. Thinking, it's one of many ways to get distracted. You could also be focusing your attention on breathing or on your heartbeat, just sitting there, rocking it, having awesome focus, and then there's an itch or your skin has a hot or a cold spot, maybe a pain or a cramp. Any physical sensation could also pull your attention away from your object of attention. The same thing could happen with a sound or any sense, a sight, taste, smell, feeling of something crawling across your skin. Any of those things could pull your attention away. And let's not forget that the ACC, the ancillary cortex, both help you focus on things physically inside you and externally in the environment, but they also allow you to focus on emotions. So these things can also distract you from your object of awareness. Maybe you start to feel bored or frustrated because this is stupid. Am I still listening to this? What I'm telling you is it doesn't matter. The point is that you focus your attention on something, and at some point, a thought, sensation, noise, sight, emotion, something's going to distract you. What you're focusing on and what distracts you isn't important. When you notice you're distracted, you bring your focus back to your object of attention. The fact that you are choosing to focus and refocus is where the magic happens. So let's do a mindfulness exercise. This is called Home Base and it's by Jeff Warren. It's found on the Calm app. It's day 2 of his Mindfulness for Beginners course, which is a 30-day course I'll tell you more about at the end. This particular exercise is going to help you find something to use as your object of attention, something to bring your focus to. So sit back, relax, and let's let Jeff take it away.
Day 2, home base. Hi, this is Jeff. Welcome to day 2 of How to Meditate. Although meditation helps us relax, it's also a kind of exercise for the mind. It builds up very specific mental muscles. And one of these is concentration. Concentration is the ability to choose what we want to pay attention to. The big idea here is we don't have to let our minds be unconsciously hijacked by just whatever comes along. If things are hard, we don't need to wait for outside circumstances to change. We can change our inside circumstances immediately by paying attention to a different part of our experience. This is a huge insight. In meditation, we do this using something called a home base. A home base is just some really simple sensation that you focus on. It could be the breath, or it could be sounds, or it might be some point in the body. The idea is to hold your attention here. When your mind wanders, which is normal, you come back. And every time you come back, concentration muscle gets stronger. It's like a bench press for the mind. Eventually, our mind gets stronger and more settled. In a way, you can think of our home base as a portable reset button we learn to take with us anywhere we go. Bob Marley said it perfectly. My home is in my head. So let's explore. Okay, so find a comfortable position. Eyes open or closed, whatever feels right for you. If your eyes are open, keep the gaze soft, looking at the ground in front of you. We can start here with a few deep breaths. So on the inhale, you're stretching up your spine. And then on the exhale, that's the downward motion. So you're relaxing your face, relaxing your shoulders. Each exhale, it's like you're breathing out any tension. So let's set our meditative attitude here. Easygoing, not uptight about things needing to be perfect. Remember, this is really the ground of meditation, this attitude. So if surrounding sounds are there, the body is a bit uncomfortable, if distractions happen, no problem. You're letting all the imperfections of life be there. So let's choose a home base, some point or sensation to pay attention to, and then come back to when we get distracted. A home base can be pretty much anything. A lot of people really like using the breath as their home base. So we'll start here. For the next little while, try to notice the soft feeling of the breath at the nostrils, or maybe down in the throat, or even at the belly, and see how you enjoy it. Try this. Good. As you're doing this, see how into the feeling of breathing you can get. So you're practicing enjoying the breath too here, appreciating the simplicity of not having to do anything else, just being with your body breathing. When your mind wanders, you gently come back. And remember that wandering and coming back is what meditation's all about. Every time we do this, we build up our muscle of being able to pay attention to what we want in life. Okay, good. So if for whatever reason you prefer not to work with the breath, that's totally fine. We can always choose a different home base. Maybe the feeling of warmth in the hands, or a point in the belly, or even sounds in the space around you, like the background sound of a vent or a fridge. If you like, choose one of these other options and then see how into it you can get, into the listening, into the feeling. Good. So we're just sitting in this easygoing way, and we're noticing our breath, or maybe we're noticing some point in the body, or maybe sounds. And you're just seeing if you can get kind of into it. And the mind wanders. Come on back. Nice. So for the last little bit here, you can stop paying attention to your home base and just completely drift. Meditation teaches us how to pay attention. What do you want to fill your attention with in life? You can fill it with something stressful, or you can fill it with something peaceful. You have the ability, the power to choose. Nothing is more important than that, more important than our fundamental ability to pay attention. What you pay attention to becomes your life. When you're ready, open your eyes.
Cool. You have just practiced mindfulness meditation. Easy, right? Mindfulness meditation is one of the most common mindfulness practices there is. By doing that, and only that, for 15, 30 minutes a day, you can physically change the structure of your brain, improving not only your mental health, but also your cognitive function as a whole. Before I give you some final recommendations for a place to start, I would like to introduce you to one more common mindfulness tradition, the body scan. The body scan meditation is similar to mindfulness meditation, but instead of holding your attention on your breath or your heartbeat or something like that, we're going to progressively feel different areas of our body, usually starting at the head or the toes. Still going to take a comfortable position. Your eyes can be closed or open. Again, it's always dealer's choice. Then slowly from our head to our toes or to our toes to our head, we're going to progressively feel different areas of our body. We'll inevitably get distracted and then at some point notice that distraction and bring our attention back to whatever body part we left off on. So let's do a body scan.
Welcome to this 5-minute guided body scan. Start by sitting comfortably with a straight back and close your eyes. Rest your hands gently on your knees or cup them softly in your lap. Relax your neck and shoulders. And as you become still, bring your attention to the breath, the calming breath, the soothing breath, the breath that connects the mind and body. Notice how it draws into your body and as it leaves your body. And now we'll begin scanning the body. So bring your attention to your head, feeling into your scalp, forehead, and face. You might notice tingling or tension, throbbing or soft vibrations. And if you don't notice anything, don't worry. All that matters is you experience whatever is there. And now lower your focus to the neck, letting the throat and sides and back of the neck soften. And if you notice any tension, see if you can allow it to relax. Now bring your attention to the shoulders, noticing what's here. Whatever you observe is perfectly fine. Bring your attention to your arms and hands, observing any sensations that arise on the surface of the skin or deeper within. Inhale and exhale, softening this entire area. Now come to the chest and torso. Notice how the lungs expand and contract. Expand and contract. Drop your attention to your abdomen. Notice it filling up with air. And then on the exhale, slowly emptying. And now scan your back and experience whatever's there. There's no right or wrong, but if you notice any intensity, try directing the breath into those areas to help them soften. And then bring your attention to your pelvis and hips. Notice where you make contact with your chair. And scan your legs, circling your attention gently around your thighs, knees, shins, and calves. Then all the way into your feet and your toes, letting them relax and become soft. And now settle into the stillness that comes from paying attention to your body part by part. And when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and toes. Bring your attention back to the room and open your eyes.
Okay. We've talked about how 1 in 3 first responders will struggle with mental health. We've talked about how our jobs physically change the structure of our brain and how that affects our mental health. And we've talked about one way we can reverse that damage and actually strengthen the vulnerable areas of our brain. But please, don't take my word for it. One of my favorite mindfulness traditions is that this is all about self exploration. I can tell you all of the reasons this is good for you and why you should do it. It's just like eating vegetables. But if you don't actually eat your vegetables, you're not going to benefit from it. No one can do this for you. The only thing you can do is try it for yourself. So, if you want to give a method a try that will improve your mental health, that's very low risk and very low cost in both terms of time and treasure, I have some recommendations to help you get started. And I think if you just give it 15 minutes a day for 30 or 60 days, you'll be hooked and see real changes in your life. First, I got started with the Calm app. It's a 30-day course called Mindfulness for Beginners. We did day 2. It's by Jeff Warren. It's great because it's a new meditation each day, but there's a short video before that discusses a principle of meditation. So it's a great way to experience different practices while also kind of getting a base understanding about what mindfulness really is. Another great option is the 10% Happier app. This app has 2 beginner courses that I really, really like, the basics and then meditation for fidgety skeptics. I'll provide links for all of these. Finally, please like and share this video with any first responder or vet or really anyone else you might think would find it informational. And if you subscribe, you'll get notified when I post additional videos. I'm going to continue to explore meditation and post more information, get more in depth on how to actually do this. If you're interested in joining a weekly mindfulness group just for first responders, shoot me a message. and let me know when would be a good time or what you think. And thanks for joining my Bob Talk.